got Caitlin Clark calling out Stephanie White for her defensive game plan and the stupid mistakes and things she keeps going back to after seeing they don't work.
Imagine spending years building toward a single night. The cameras are set. The marketing team is ready. Your signature sneaker, the one with your name stitched into every seam, is about to debut in front of the entire basketball world.
And we kind of went back to our old ways where that second rotation we didn't get, and then they scored off the 90 cuts and the 45 cuts.
Now imagine that night ending with you fouled out, your team crumbling defensively, and the whole celebration turning into a documented disaster. That is exactly what happened to Caitlin Clark, but the loss itself is not the story. What she said afterward, with the cameras still rolling in front of every reporter in that room, about her own coaching staff and the defensive system they keep running, that is the story. And what unfolded in the minutes after those words left her mouth might be the most revealing moment of this entire double.
You see that? We went right back to the old defense where nobody's rotating. We're playing one-on-one. There's no help. There's no rotations.
WNBA season. Because this was not some vague, diplomatic, say-nothing answer designed to protect the organization. This was Caitlin Clark naming the exact defensive breakdown, by mechanism, by failure point, on the record, after a loss on the single biggest commercial night of her career. And the person responsible for that system had to walk up to the same podium just minutes later.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
To understand the weight of what happened that night, you have to understand what that night was supposed to be. Back in April 2024, Caitlin Clark signed an 8-year, $28 million signature sneaker deal with Nike. That alone was historic. When the Caitlin one was finally unveiled, it wasn't just a basketball shoe, it was a statement. A bright blue silhouette featuring Nike's brand new Opticast upper technology, a construction so innovative it was designed specifically to reduce drag and enhance on-court movement. Clark was hands-on throughout the entire design process, embedding personal Easter eggs into every detail. Phrases like "shoot more threes" and "from anywhere" etched into the outsole, patterning that highlights her iconic number 22, a personal logo stamped on the tongue. The racer blue colorway was set to retail at $140, and pre-orders sold out on Nike's website within 24 hours. That made the Caitlin one of the most in-demand sneaker drops of the entire year. Clark became only the 5th active WNBA player to land a signature shoe from a major brand, joining names like Aja Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, Breena Stewart, and Angel Reese. She compared the whole process to releasing a debut album. She wanted it to be killer, and the stage was set perfectly. The opponent, the Atlanta Dream led by Angel Reese, Clark's biggest rival, the player fans love to compare her to. Cameras were positioned for a celebration, a commercial milestone, a cultural moment circled on marketing calendars months in advance. But what those cameras actually captured had absolutely nothing to do with sneakers. Clark came out on fire. She was cooking from the opening tip, moving with the kind of precision and confidence you'd expect from someone playing on a night built entirely around her. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, she had 26 points on an efficient 8 of 17.
So we know the Indiana Fever took a disgusting loss to the Atlanta Dream in Caitlin Clark's sneaker debut day in a game where she was absolutely going off, 26-7 going into the fourth quarter, and then she finishes the game with 26-7 due to foul trouble.
Shooting, 7 assists, and was pulling strings offensively like she'd been doing all season. And then nothing. Not a single point scored in the fourth quarter. Foul trouble pulled her off the floor at the worst possible moment, and the Fever never recovered. Final score, 108-101 Atlanta. The Dream didn't just win, they dismantled Indiana's defense from every angle. All 5 Atlanta starters finished in double figures. Angel Reese posted 21 points and 11 rebounds for her 10th double-double of the season, the most of any player in the league. Jordan Canada added 18. Naz Hillman and Alicia Gray each poured in 17. Ryan Howard chipped in 16. That is 5 different players.
A lot of times, like, that's probably on us guards, getting into the ball a little bit better so we don't have to rotate, but I think we could have done a little bit better. Like, we're going to
carving through the same defense with ease. Clark finished with the worst plus-minus on her own roster at -13, on her own milestone night, on the day her signature shoe debuted in front of cameras specifically positioned to document a celebration. Instead, they documented a collapse. And the reason for that collapse was not complicated. It was not some mystery that required hours of film study. The Fever's defense left Clark isolated, exposed, and hunted. Teams have been targeting her all season, attacking her in one-on-one situations, knowing Indiana's defensive structure offers no help, no rotation, no safety net. On the biggest commercial night of her career, that exact vulnerability got exploited at the exact worst moment. Clark watched it happen in real time. She lived inside the failure for 40 minutes. And when the microphones turned on after the final buzzer, she did something she had never done quite like this before. Most athletes step to the podium after a loss and deliver the same recycled lines. We need to be better collectively. We'll go back and watch the film. Credit to the other team.
Kelsey said, like, essentially everybody on their team shot over 50%. It's really hard to win a basketball game when that's the case.
Team, safe, diplomatic, forgettable. Caitlin Clark did none of that. She stood at that podium and said the team went back to their old ways. She said the second rotation never came. She said opponents scored off the 90 cuts and the 45 cuts. Read that again. She did not vaguely gesture at team struggles. She named the specific defensive mechanism that broke down. She identified exactly when it broke down, and she connected it directly to a pattern that had already failed against multiple opponents earlier in the season. That phrase, old ways, is not throwaway language. That is Clark explicitly identifying this as a recurring, previously recognized, previously failed defensive approach that the coaching staff chose to return to anyway. And then she went further. She referenced her teammate Kelsey Mitchell arriving at the same conclusion independently, pointing out that every single player on Atlanta's roster shot over 50% from the field. That detail matters enormously. This was not Clark's isolated frustration boiling over. This was multiple players inside the same locker room recognizing the same systemic failure and naming it publicly in the same press conference. When an entire opposing roster shoots over 50%, that is not bad luck. That is not a tough shooting night from the other side. That is a defensive system structurally failing to contest shots, structurally failing to rotate, and structurally failing to make a single opponent uncomfortable across 40 minutes of basketball. Clark identified the mechanism. Mitchell confirmed the conclusion. And the next person scheduled to address the media was the coach responsible for the system both of them had just publicly called out. But that was not even the most explosive part. Here is where you have to understand the deeper fracture underneath this moment. Stephanie White's coaching philosophy, the one she has repeatedly emphasized across this season, centers on individual defensive responsibility. Guard your matchup. Win your one-on-one battle. Trust your defender to contain penetration without pulling a teammate off their own assignment. Clark is describing the exact opposite conclusion from the exact same results. She is saying the one-on-one approach is the problem. That rotations are necessary. That the team needs to commit to helping each other rather than relying on individual containment that has repeatedly failed against fast, perimeter-oriented opponents who exploit exactly the gaps a no-help system creates. Two people, same locker room, same defensive results, completely opposite conclusions about what those results mean and what should change. That is not a minor disagreement about timing or positioning. That is a fundamental philosophical collision about how professional basketball defense should be played. And this is not the first time it's surfaced. Clark referenced previous games where this exact defensive approach failed in the exact same fashion. The same breakdowns happened against Golden State. The same breakdowns happened against Portland, a game where Clark and White were caught in an animated sideline exchange that went viral. After that Portland loss, there was reportedly a 90-minute team meeting where players aired out their feelings and discussed identity. The Fever responded with a 5-1 stretch. Something clicked. And then against Atlanta, on Clark's sneaker debut night, the coaching staff went right back to the
one-on-one D. That was pretty much the story of when we had our defensive failings. It was our one-on-one D. We tried to wait until they caught the ball to defend. We didn't make it difficult for them.
Our one-on-one defense. Why are we playing one-on-one the whole time? Now, I get it on straight line blow-bys. I understand that. But you had plays where people are putting the ball on the floor, dribble, and nobody is stepping over to help at any point in time. Why would you go back to this when you saw this did not work?
Them to pass the ball around the perimeter, and they're fast. When they catch it on the run and attack our feet, we're already behind.
Same system, and it failed the same way for a third time. Sources in the press room described White's demeanor after Clark's comments as visibly different from her usual composure. Not the careful, measured, message-disciplined version of herself she typically brings to that podium. Something rower, something that reportedly looked a lot like a coach who had just been publicly contradicted by her own franchise player and was not handling it well. And what White did at the podium was exactly what the pattern predicted. She did not address Clark's specific critique. She did not acknowledge the rotation failures. She returned to the same talking points: individual responsibility, one-on-one containment, the exact philosophy Clark had just identified as the source of the problem. The disconnect was impossible to miss. The most important player on the roster had just explained in technical detail exactly why the system keeps failing. And the coach responsible for that system defended it anyway, visibly frustrated, while the cameras captured every second. Now here is where the consequences of this defensive dysfunction extend far beyond a single press conference. Clark's individual numbers this season are undeniably elite. She is leading the entire WNBA in assists at over 8 per game. She sits fourth in scoring at over 20 points per game. Her turnover numbers are at a career low. Her efficiency is locked in. By every individual measure, she is playing the best basketball of her professional career. And she is sliding in the MVP conversation. A'ja Wilson is putting up arguably the greatest individual season in WNBA history. Over 25 points per game, 9 rebounds, over 2 blocks, all on 52% shooting, while leading a Las Vegas.
Why would you go back to this when you saw this did not work?
Them to pass the ball around the perimeter, and they're fast. When they catch it on the run and attack our feet, we're already behind.
This lady has got to go. This lady has got to go. And furthermore, Caitlin Clark has got to take the bull by the horns, and you gotta make a decision. This is courtesy of Sports Illustrated, and Caitlin Clark's brand is obviously taking a hit for this. Obviously, there's been some huge smear campaign going on. Everybody's flipping sides. We see what's going on out here. Caitlin Clark and her brand are being attacked in this moment. We've seen the all-star voting. I think there's some shady stuff going on. It's funny business going on surrounding Caitlin Clark right now. And I think the smear campaign is still alive, well, and kicking. That's what I think. But take a look at this here. Courtesy of Sports Illustrated. Caitlin Clark falling way behind in the WNBA MVP prediction market. Okay. Here it says the fever coming down on Caitlin Clark, and so the fever is coming down on Caitlin Clark, and so are her MVP chances. On prediction markets show a negative trend in Clark's MVP chances over the last month, despite her strong play. Clark is putting up MVP caliber numbers to start the season at 20 points, 8 assists, 4 rebounds. Her scoring and assists total ranked top 5 in the WNBA. The real slide stems from A'ja Wilson's scorching start. Okay, here it says Wilson holding Clark back. While many view Clark's numbers as MVP worthy, Wilson is simply outplaying her and averaging 26 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists 2 blocks and a steal and a half. That's all while leading Las Vegas to the second best record in the league. MVP voters weigh team records heavily. This hurts Clark, especially against Wilson, as Indiana is in 7th place at 9-6. And now they're talking about other people. They're talking about Paige Beckers is a threat to win MVP. Here it says, Dallas Wings second-year guard Beckers holds the advantage despite sitting behind Clark in scoring, assists, and rebounds. Beckers is the main reason Dallas turned it around after a 10-34 finish last season. Okay, and then people are talking about Olivia Miles being in the MVP race. It's so much going on. And the percentages right now, they got Asia Wilson, Paige Beckers, and Caitlin Clark. I think you probably have to have Olivia Miles over Paige Beckers at this point. And this is what I mean, man. Stephanie White is getting in the way, and she's messing up the Caitlin Clark brand, man. Caitlin Clark was supposed to go on an MVP run this year, but instead we got Stephanie White over here messing it up, going back to the same defense that did not work, that teams exploited. We went back to the same defense we played versus the Golden State Valkyries, pretty much. Same defensive stuff we went to versus the Portland Fire.
Team sitting near the top of the standings. Wilson already holds a league record for MVP awards, and she is on pace to add another one. But here is the
Caitlin Clark falling way behind in the WNBA MVP prediction market. Caitlin Clark, and so are her MVP chances. On prediction markets show a negative trend in Clark's MVP chances over the last month.
Part that should frustrate every Fever fan reading this. MVP voters weigh team records heavily, and Indiana is sitting around 7th place with a record that does not reflect Clark's individual brilliance. That gap between Clark's production and Indiana's standing is not a talent problem. It is a direct, measurable consequence of a defensive system that keeps breaking in the same documented fashion, costing winnable games and dragging the team record down with it. Paige Beckers is surging in Dallas. Olivia Miles is making noise. The MVP race is getting crowded, and every loss Indiana takes because of defensive breakdowns Clark herself identified pushes her further down the list through no fault of her own play. Her all-star voting numbers tell the same story. Last year, Clark led the first round of returns with over 515,000 votes. This year, she sits 5th with roughly 253,000. The momentum that was supposed to build around her is stalling. And the defensive stubbornness she keeps calling out is the documented reason why. The commercial fallout does not stop at MVP votes. That sneaker debut was supposed to launch a narrative. Caitlin Clark, signature athlete, cultural icon, taking the floor in her own shoe and delivering a statement performance. Instead, the narrative became about a loss, a foul out, a defensive collapse, and a public disagreement with her own head coach. Angel Reese spoiled the party with a double-double and her 10th of the season. Clark's head-to-head advantage over Reese, which sat at 6-1 entering the game, just took a visible crack on the biggest possible stage. Among Clark's fan base, frustration has boiled into something louder. There is a growing sentiment, particularly on social media, that the system is working against her.
Clark's numbers is MVP worthy. Wilson is simply outplaying her and averaging 26 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal and a half. That's all while leading Las Vegas to the second best record in the league. MVP voters weigh team records heavily. This hurts Clark, especially against Wilson, as Indiana is in 7th place at 9-6.
Fans point to the all-star voting drop, the MVP prediction market slide, and the shoe timing as evidence of what some are openly calling a smear campaign. Now, to be clear, that language reflects fan perception and frustration more than documented fact. There is no verified evidence of any coordinated effort against Clark, but the underlying reality fueling that frustration is real and documented. A coaching staff that keeps returning to a failed defensive system, a franchise player who keeps naming the exact failure, a team record that does not match the talent on the roster. When your best player's brand, MVP case, and commercial momentum are all being weighed down by the same fixable problem, frustration is inevitable, and it is no longer just fans asking the hard questions. So here is where everything lands. Caitlin Clark stood at a podium after her own sneaker debut ended in a fouled out, defensively disastrous loss and named, specifically, technically on the record, exactly what is broken about her team's defensive system. Stephanie White took that same podium minutes later, visibly frustrated, and defended the exact philosophy her franchise player had just identified as the source of the problem. Now, both of them have publicly said they respect each other. Clark once said she bawled in White's arms after getting hurt against Connecticut, calling her someone she would ride for the rest of her life. White has called them more alike than different, two competitive personalities pushing each other. That mutual respect is real, but respect does not resolve a fundamental philosophical disagreement about how to play defense. The Fever are 3 games above 500, their best start since 2012. The offense is among the best in the league. Championship aspirations are not unrealistic, but championships are won on defense. And right now, the franchise player and the head coach are looking at the same defensive results and drawing completely opposite conclusions. Clark has been right about this pattern across Golden State, Portland, and Atlanta, 3 separate documented instances of the same failure, with Clark correctly identifying the mechanism each time. White has had 3 opportunities to adjust. She has not taken any of them. That press conference was not the crisis. It was just the moment the crisis became impossible to ignore. So the question is simple, and it is the one the Indiana Fever front office can no longer avoid. When your franchise player, the most statistically productive guard in the league, the player whose commercial value built this organization's entire current trajectory, stands at a podium and explains in technical detail exactly why your defense keeps failing, and your head coach responds by defending the same system while visibly agitated about having to address the criticism, who do you believe? Because at some point, someone has to blink. And every game that passes without resolution is another game where the gap between Clark's individual brilliance and Indiana's actual record widens, with direct consequences for the team's playoff standing, Clark's MVP case, and the relationship between 2 people who both say they respect each other but clearly do not see the same game. Drop your thoughts. Does Stephanie White finally adjust? Or does this keep building until someone in that front office is forced to make the decision nobody wants to make?